And plus, Boomer threw the ball about 400 miles an hour. He threw everything a little bit high.
It's a little bit different of the dynamic. The ball comes out of our hands a little bit differently, and it comes from a different arm angle and slot.
So, from a right-handed passer, you're predominantly catching the ball with your right hand.
If you're not used to playing with a left-hander, I could see how that could be a little bit uncomfortable at the beginning.
Now, a left-handed quarterback comes along, and now you're catching it three quarters with your left hand and one quarter with your right hand, which is completely opposite of what you're used to doing.
How good was Boomer Esiason, really? Some people dismiss him as just a radio guy now, someone yelling about football because his playing days are long done. They say Boomer had talent but couldn't win the big one. He's a footnote, a guy with an interesting arm who got his moment and faded away. But here's what changed my mind. When a current NFL head coach running a Super Bowl contender was asked about Boomer's recent criticism of a coaching hire, he didn't brush it off. He didn't laugh it away. He treated that opinion like it actually mattered, like Boomer was still part of something sacred in the game. If a modern coach still respects him that much, what exactly did the people closest to the game actually see in Boomer Esiason? If you're curious about what these legendary takes on Boomer really mean, hit that hype button right now and let's discover the truth together. When you sit down and listen to the guys who actually knew Boomer, who played beside him and coached him and faced him as opponents, the picture becomes totally different. These aren't casual observations from people on the outside looking in. These are testimonies from people who lived in the NFL's highest circles, and they all tell versions of the same profound story. You have to start with the people closest to him, the guys who saw everything unfold. Number one is Chris Collinsworth, who caught passes from Boomer for years and became one of his brothers in football. Collinsworth tells a story that sums up what it was like to play with Boomer. He calls them hospital passes. These were aggressive, perfectly placed balls that arrived where they needed to be, but the receiver was about to get buried by a safety or linebacker. Boomer joked about sending Collinsworth a massage therapist after his first game because he got him killed. That dark humor tells you something deeper about their connection. Collinsworth was willing to take those hits because he knew Boomer would put the ball exactly where needed. That's trust at the highest level. But Collinsworth's respect runs much deeper than funny stories. He talks about resilience during the Super Bowl 23 run. Boomer led them through a grueling season to the biggest stage. In that Super Bowl against the 49ers, Boomer orchestrated a drive that put the Bengals ahead late. Then Joe Montana happened. Montana drove the 49ers down the field and won it. But Collinsworth remembers Boomer standing like a warrior, competing against greatness without backing down. Off the field, Collinsworth watched Boomer transform into something more inspiring. When Boomer's son Gunnar was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis in the early 1990s, Boomer became a crusader. He raised hundreds of millions for research. Collinsworth witnessed this journey appearing in documentaries. The resilience Boomer showed in the pocket is the same he showed off the field. That's when Collinsworth understood Boomer's legacy was bigger than football. Collinsworth also brings up something technical about Boomer that matters more than you might think. Boomer was a left-handed quarterback, which created real problems for his receivers. The ball had different spin and different trajectory. Everything about the mechanics was flipped. Receivers had to learn a completely different language for tracking the football in the air. This wasn't something they could pick up in 1 week. It required real adjustment and real practice. The fact that Collinsworth and those receivers succeeded and became elite tells you how special Boomer was. He didn't make things easier for his teammates. They had to work harder because of him. Number two is Bob Trumpy, a Bengals legend who played in the franchise's earliest days and went on to have a prominent broadcasting career with NBC. Trumpy knew Boomer through the Bengals organization and understood the culture that was built there. One thing Trumpy always brings up is the wicked humor. That's not just a compliment about being funny. It's the cynical, sharp-witted banter that players use to cope with pain and constant pressure. In the NFL, you get hit hard, you get injured, you're always vulnerable. Wicked humor is how you stay mentally sane. When Trumpy talks about Boomer having wicked humor, he's saying Boomer was a guy's guy. He fit into the rough locker room world completely. He could take hits, laugh about them, and come back for more. That humor was never just surface-level funny, though. Trumpy makes this clear in interviews. Underneath that sharp wit was a burning competitive spirit. The humor was a mask for someone who absolutely needed to win. Boomer could joke about hospital passes and getting teammates killed, but that same Boomer was the quarterback pushing the offense to move faster and execute harder every single play. Trumpy saw this firsthand because he was part of a lineage of Bengals players who went into broadcasting. Trumpy went to NBC. Boomer eventually went to ABC and CBS. Collinsworth went to NBC. These weren't random career moves. They were part of a tradition of Bengals players who understood the game at the highest level. Trumpy watched Boomer's competitive spirit and his ability to lead men, and he knew Boomer belonged in that broadcasting role. Number three is Solomon Wilcots. a defensive back for the Bengals in the late 1980s and now a respected analyst on television. Wilcox was on the defense while Boomer was running the offense, which gives him a unique perspective from the other side of the ball. He describes Boomer as the engine. That's his word specifically. While Sam Weich designed the car and created the system, Boomer was the engine that powered everything. An engine provides the thrust. It sets the rhythm. It determines how fast the whole machine can go. In 1988, when the Bengals were running that no-huddle offense, they were running plays with absolutely relentless efficiency. The defense had zero time to breathe. The offense would snap the ball almost immediately. Boomer was the driving force behind that entire system. He was calling the plays, reading the defense, making split-second decisions. Wilcox remembers 1988 as Boomer's MVP year specifically. Boomer led the entire league with a 97.4 passer rating and 9.2 yards per attempt. That's ridiculous efficiency even by modern standards where passing is more prevalent. From the defensive side of the ball, Wilcox watched an offense that never gave his unit a breather. They had to stay sharp all game because the offense was punching them repeatedly. That kind of consistency and dominance only comes from a quarterback who is completely locked in mentally and physically. Wilcox also makes an interesting comparison in his analysis. He talks about later versions of the Bengals where management seemed more interested in winning arguments than winning actual football games. That's his way of saying the priority got twisted and corrupted. In Boomer's era, there was one singular focus on the team: victory. Everything else was completely secondary. Boomer's leadership in the locker room had swag and edge. He demanded accountability from everyone. He demanded execution on every play. He set a standard that was unforgiving because winning was the only option. That's the engine Wilcox is really talking about. Not just throwing accurate passes, but driving the entire culture toward excellence. Number 4 is Dan Campbell, the current head coach of the Detroit Lions. Campbell is a modern voice, and his testimony is recent and directly relevant. He brings something completely different to this conversation. He's an active coach in the NFL dealing with current issues and current players. But even in this modern era, Boomer's voice still carries real weight and authority. There's this concept in football called the NFL fraternity. It's an unwritten social contract among people who have played or coached at the highest level. You either have skin in the game or you don't. You're either a member of the club or you're on the outside. Boomer is very much a member of that exclusive club. The situation that brings Campbell into this story involves Aaron Glenn, who was the Lions' defensive coordinator and is now the head coach of the New York Jets. Boomer, who played for the Jets himself and was a teammate of Glenn's in the mid-1990s, had concerns about the Jets' job. He didn't attack Glenn's ability or potential. Instead, Boomer warned him as a fraternity brother would. He said the Jets' job is a beast and more demanding than anybody realizes. He noted that the organization had thrown money at every aspect and still couldn't fix problems. That's experience talking. That's someone who's been in that locker room, warning a friend about what he's walking into. But Boomer also said he prays Glenn gets his shot. He's warning Glenn about the challenges while respecting him completely. When Dan Campbell responded to the situation, he didn't dismiss Boomer. That's the key point. Campbell defended Glenn as a leader of men who would command the room, but Campbell also acknowledged that Boomer's opinion came from a respected member of the NFL fraternity. Campbell said Boomer's opinions carry significant weight in media and football. That validation is crucial. In an era where everyone thinks they're a football analyst, Campbell distinguishes Boomer as a peer. Boomer is an MVP. He's someone whose experience and judgment matter. That's what it means to be part of the fraternity. That's the weight Boomer carries. Number 5 is Joe Gibbs, the Hall of Fame coach of the Washington Redskins, who won 3 Super Bowls total. Gibbs is one of the greatest offensive minds in all of NFL history. He brings a completely different angle to this entire story. He's not someone who coached Boomer or played alongside him. He's someone who competed against him directly, someone from a rival organization. But that makes his commentary even more powerful and meaningful. During an interview on Boomer's radio show, Gibbs made a joke that has stuck around for decades since. He said he didn't draft Boomer from the University of Maryland because it would have been too easy. On the surface, that's just two peers joking around. But when you understand what that really means, it's absolutely profound. Joe Gibbs' offense was famous for the counter-tray running game. He had the Hogs, the legendary offensive line that could dominate the line of scrimmage. That running game set up the deep passing attack. The quarterback in Gibbs' system needed to be a master of the play-action fake. He had to hide the ball perfectly, freeze the linebackers, and deliver deep strikes downfield with precision. Boomer Esiason was one of the greatest play-action fakers in NFL history. His left-handed delivery added an extra layer of deception that right-handed quarterbacks couldn't match. His ball handling skills were elite level. Gibbs saw all of that and understood something crucial. If he'd drafted Boomer and put him in the Redskins system with the Hogs and receivers like Art Monk, Gary Clark, and Ricky Sanders, it would have been completely unstoppable. That's what Gibbs meant by too easy. He's saying that pairing Boomer's specific skill set with Washington's offensive firepower would have been unfair to the rest of the entire league. Gibbs won 3 Super Bowls with Joe Theismann, Doug Williams, and Mark Rypien. Those were competent and effective quarterbacks who executed the system, but none had the sustained MVP-level excellence that Boomer displayed in Cincinnati. By saying it would have been too easy, Gibbs places Boomer in a tier above the quarterbacks he actually won championships with. When you look at the statistics, that makes complete sense. Boomer's 1988 peak was almost identical to Mark Rypien's 1991 season, which is considered one of the greatest. Boomer had comparable numbers to Joe Theismann's MVP year. So Gibbs's comment wasn't exaggeration. It was rooted in solid statistical reality. Boomer was a plug-and-play elite option. This comment addresses the narrative that Boomer couldn't win the big game. He lost Super Bowl 23 to Joe Montana and the 49ers. That's a fact. But Gibbs is suggesting that had Boomer landed in a slightly different city, played for Washington instead of Cincinnati, he might have multiple Super Bowl rings. He might have been part of a dynasty even greater than Washington's already impressive legacy. That's not Gibbs dismissing Boomer at all. That's Gibbs validating him as a force multiplier, a player who would have elevated a championship team into something absolutely unstoppable. Number 6 is Sam Wyche, the head coach who actually drafted Boomer and built the system completely around him. Wyche is the architect, and understanding his vision is crucial to understanding why Boomer mattered so much. Wyche created the no-huddle offense back in the mid-1980s. He wasn't doing it as a gimmick or a 2-minute drill tactic. He was weaponizing tempo as his base offensive philosophy. The idea was to push the ball up to the line so fast that the defense couldn't substitute. They couldn't get their nickel package on the field. They had to line up with base personnel, and base personnel gets mismatched against skill players constantly. Wyche calls this system his brainchild. That word is important. It implies ownership and protection. Wyche couldn't trust it to just any quarterback. He called Boomer the perfect quarterback for this system, but that perfection came with an enormous mental burden. Boomer had to learn every nook and cranny of the offense. That's not flowery language. That's a real technical requirement. Without a huddle, Boomer had to read the defense instantly, but more than that, he had to understand the entire strategic philosophy. Wyche revealed that Boomer had to learn how the coaches spoke to each other. That means Boomer wasn't just memorizing plays. He was learning the linguistic and strategic syntax of the entire coaching staff. He had to think like a coordinator on the field. Here's where it gets intense. Wyche would never allow Boomer to wear a wristband. In modern football, quarterbacks have wristbands with plays written on them. Wyche removed that net entirely. He wanted Boomer's brain to be the database. Instead, Wyche barraged Boomer with daily quizzes of formations, tendencies, and personnel groups. These were stress tests. By removing the wristband and hammering Boomer with constant quizzes, Wyche ensured that on Sunday, Boomer's reaction time would be instantaneous. He wouldn't have to think, he would just know. The relationship between Wyche and Boomer went beyond X's and O's. Wyche had emotional intelligence that Boomer deeply appreciated. Boomer said Wyche had a way of making you feel really good about yourself. That matters when you're operating without a safety net. Wyche's confidence in Boomer allowed him to take ownership of the system. Eventually, Boomer said that Wyche made him into the NFL quarterback he became. More importantly, Boomer acknowledged that Wyche entrusted his brainchild to nobody else but Boomer. That exclusivity is everything. That trust was earned through intelligence, work ethic, and a special quarterback mind. The 1988 Bengals led the league in scoring and total yards. That's not accident. That's Wyche's brilliance combined with Boomer's execution. That's the architect and his avatar working in perfect sync. When you stack all of these voices on top of each other, the picture becomes completely clear. A current coach respects Boomer's voice in the media. A teammate took hits because he trusted Boomer's throw. A defensive back saw him as the engine. A teammate remembered the competitive fire underneath humor. A rival coach acknowledged he would have drafted him, and the coach who created the system called him the perfect quarterback. That's how good Boomer Esiason was. The people closest to the game believed in him completely. They saw a mind that could run an offense like a coordinator. They saw a competitor who would do whatever it took. They saw a leader demanding excellence from everyone. They saw resilience in the biggest moments. That's the kind of quarterback legends remember. That's the kind of legacy that doesn't fade. If you made it this far, you understand why coaches still listen. You understand why his voice carries weight. Thanks for watching. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel.